So we'll just run through some of these. I'll try to do it one at a piece at a time, but because I've just told you about the better chemicals. So this, I'm going for this quirky new laws you may not have heard by Russell Palmer, and I've been looking at some of these issues. I've been telling people about them beforehand, and they're now doing a little puff piece where they basically make it out to sound like this stuff's all really really great. So they're doing another one where they're saying about sunscreen standards bringing safety into light. And this is all about by Todd Muller. And again, it's all about, oh, isn't it wonderful to make things all nice and safe? Totally agree with it. But again, if you look at the devils in the detail, this safety standard would match the Australian New Zealand standards for sunscreen. So again, what it's actually really about is passing the regulatory authority over, making it easier for corporations that are based in Australia to get things happening over there. And as long as they meet the Australian or the overseas regulations, cumbia, let's not look too closely. So that's really the devil. I mean, that does have positive aspects, that legislation, but I don't really think that's why it's being pursued. And I think it's what we really need to understand a lot when we're looking at legislation these days. So the words that we need to get in our heads is lockstep. And this is where you notice one bit of legislation which by itself, but when you start to pile them all together, you start to look at something quite nasty. So like again, like a string by itself is just a string, a whole bunch of strings woven together make a rope. Is the analogy which we'll stick with. Now, this one is actually quite a good one. Councillors cash communiques following the money in local government. While MPs' expenses and file interests are public released on a regular basis, it's a difficult story for local councillors. Now, you might have remembered just before the Christchurch shooting that Dazil basically was found, her husband was found involved in lobbying on behalf of water groups for China. Now, it says here that the Serious Fraud Office investigation into Christchurch and Auckland Mayor's, highlights his bushes. Dazil was cleared, which is not. Her husband basically died, and is how she got away with it. And Gough is still ongoing, which again is one of those sort of stories which is really not getting a lot. The key point about this, the proposed penalty for failing to do this is a $5,000 fine. Now, my problem with this, my overall feeling about this bill is it's actually not a bad bill, but it does create the situation where the bigger boys can write it out. They've got the money to actually go, well, we don't need to pay that. If we get caught, we'll just pay the fine. Whereas it really is in a way kind of targeting the little people. So really the difference of those scales of those fines should probably be related to the war chest that's involved. Hooches and horses, BY booze for the racetrack. I'm going to skip over that one because it's not really that relevant, other than to remind people, of course, that when Winston Peters was in power, he managed to get $75 million for the horse industry as part of COVID relief, while St John Ambulances fired off 100 St John ambulance drivers to basically, yeah, no money for ambulance drivers during a national emergency health. This is another one which is interesting, which is the Plain Language Bill. No flowery phrasing with this one. The Plain Language Bill is the name of Labour's Rachel Boyack's aim to improve transparency by making government websites and documents jargon-free and easy to understand. I'm gonna come back for that one another day. I feel that there's something not quite right there, but I can't put my finger on it. I do point out Rachel Boyack is one of the people that went, oh yes, get behind me, vote for me, I'll stop the TPA. She actually got a picture of her walking down the street going, no way, TPPA. And of course Labour got in and voted, and of course with that turn around the voting in the TPA, a lot of what we're seeing now is this increased things of the regulation stuff being done overseas, that we're happy to bring it into our own country. And not ask too many questions, and it's just more power for the corporations and less power for us. And I told you about that was the main thing. Now, this is an interesting one too. This is the international waters, the law of the sea. From Pirates to The Simpsons, the international waters are famously portrayed as a lawless place where the arm cannot reach. No longer, at least, it wasn't ever quite that simple. Well, it never was. The Maritime Bill asserts New Zealand's authority to enforce New Zealand criminal laws on New Zealand flagged vessels. on foreign flagged or stateless vessels in the areas which New Zealand has extrajudicial jurisdiction when a person on a vessel international is suspected of breaking the law. Now, they say the aim of this is to ensure that things like international organised can be fought. Yarr. It's a government bill in the name of Foreign Minister Nania Mahuta, and it's been through the select process, so it's fairly plain sailing from here. Now, the Greens actually have been opposed to this, and they've probably saying the powers that grants are the same as those in the Search and Surveillance Act of 2012, granted people as enforcement officers, and it says that the same as those in the Search and Surveillance Act 2012, granting powers as enforcement officers go beyond the police force that have specific type of training in a bill. So in other words, what this is actually doing is giving the right of corporations the right to do what police officers or agents of the Crown can do. This is all, again, very much what we're seeing in thing, very much TPA, part of the 2000 Work and Safety Bill and 2012 Food Bill also have bits in there which empower basically corporations. We're actually also starting to see the introduction of things like warrantless searches, which again is all about this whole idea of extending the power of the corporate bill, because you can serve a warrant search. Doesn't need to be served by a police officer. It can be appointed by a Crown, by someone that the Crown gives permission to do. Again, this is all very much part of that whole TPPA situation. More importantly, what it's also really talking about is the fact that it goes in combinations with various legislation that's been put in place beforehand, preventing the ability to protest at sea. These actually are laws which are constitutionally questionable because they underwrite our actual right to protest, which is part of our common law in our English statutes, and then also, I guess, covered under the tikanga of customary rights for both the Declaration of Nationhood 1835 and the Treaty of Waitangi 1840. This is very, very important too, because again, when we look at a lot of things that beforehand seem to be going like the, yes, let's all use scooters and chargeless phones from minerals which we pull out of the ground, which New Zealand just has to be sitting on a shitload of them, because the New Zealand continent, which officially kind of only came into place in 2017, means that New Zealand's right on top of it, which means that our economic exclusion zone has just now increased massively, thus enhancing the strategic importance of New Zealand. And what we're seeing, a lot of what's actually happening, is that there is very much a drive for mining companies to actually come into New Zealand to drill on land and at sea. And this in turn will actually enhance the power of those companies to actually combat against people who want to protest. So, of course, the people who want to protest are the people that want to protect the environment. But apparently that's not what we want to do. And this again gets this whole point of what's actually happening right now with the Greens, the attack on the Green leadership, saying, well, actually, you're not very credible. You're James Shaw, you're flying off on big jumbo jets to hang out with people in Lear jets that have conferences about climate change, which aren't actually conferences about how to stop climate changes. They're actually tend to be conferences about what are the investment opportunities for climate change. And those investment opportunities normally actually involve providing themselves as a strategic partner to the UN goals on sustainable development goals, and which in turn means that they provide funding for various UN-based projects, which are carried out or overseen in relation to things like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. And then unless all that money is actually privately funded, it actually leaves the corporations in control of the situation, and they end up basically using that power of the purse strings to actually push through their own agendas, which, generally speaking, have very little to do with the environment. On that note, this is another interesting one too, which is this is the one close to home for me. We'll stop there because I think it's worthy of an independent little step back. So yes, that's the main thing, is that right now is we've got that bill as there is the passing through the maritime seas, which fits quite nicely with a whole bunch of other things that Nani Mahuta is actually doing, who is the Minister of the Local Government and as the Minister of Foreign Affairs. She is doing a pretty damn good job of ensuring that her overseas mates get what they want.